Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Woodman, and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. In this video, we will talk about how conflict inspires us. This is important for helping you grow as a person and treat others better, as well as spark some creativity. Let's begin by talking about the story of the Wright brothers on listening to each other through disagreement. In Dare County, North Carolina, there is a small town called Kill Devil Hills, built on sandy ground near the sea. In September 1902, the town and its airport did not yet exist, but there were two men among the sand dunes standing face to face next to a piece of heavy machinery, waving their arms in the air, shouting at each other. For a couple of months, brothers Wilbur and Orville Wright had been going out to Kill Devil Hills with the best glider they have ever built. Using data from wind tunnel experiments, they knew exactly what wing design would provide the best lift and the least drag. But in their test flights, they kept encountering a persistent problem, which accumulated in a near-death experience for one of them. On September 23rd, 1902, as Orville attempted a turn, one wing suddenly went high while the other went low. The glider spun out of control and crashed into the sand. The result, according to Orville's diary, was, quote, a heap of flying machine, clock, and sticks with me in the center without a bruise or scratch, unquote. The problem, which they judge as occurring every 50 glides, was potentially fatal. The brothers called it well digging. It later became known as a tailspin. They urgently needed to solve it if they were to realize their ambition of building the first flying machine. On the evening of October 2nd, 1902, the Wright brothers discussed the problem along with their friend George Spratt and soon got to arguing. Orville, the younger brother, shouted and waved his arms around. Wilbur replied in short bursts. Spratt felt deeply uncomfortable, but he would have known this was far from unusual. The Wright brothers were bare-knuckle debaters. To add some more context to who they are, the Wright brothers invented the aeroplane. Wilbur and Orville were not scientists. They didn't even attend a university or college. They were not attached to any corporation or institution. They ran a bicycle ship in Dayton, Ohio. They had accomplished relatively little right up until they solved one of the greatest engineering puzzles in history. The Wright brothers, born 4 years apart, had a close relationship. Wilbur said, quote, from the time we were little children, my brother Orville and myself lived together, worked together, and in fact, thought together, unquote. The way they thought together was through agreement. The sound of their quarreling was a familiar sound to Dayton locals who heard it spilling out from the floor above their shop. It was their father, Milton Wright, who taught his sons how to argue productively. After the evening meal, Milton would introduce a topic and instruct the boys to debate it as vigorously as possible without being disrespectful. Then, following the classical rules of debate, he would instruct them to change sides and start again. It proved to be great training. One of the brothers' biographers, Tom Crouch, wrote, quote, in time, they would learn to argue in a more efficient way, tossing ideas back and forth in a kind of verbal shorthand until a kernel of truth began to emerge. Wilbur noted how discussion, quote, brings out new ways of looking at things and rounds off the corners, unquote. So going back to George Spratt, when he returned home, he wrote a letter to Wilbur expressing his discomfort at the way the brothers argued. He was particularly perturbed by the way the brothers would switch sides in the middle of an argument, which struck him as dishonest. Here was Wilbur's response. Quote, "It was not my intention to advocate dishonesty in argument nor a bad spirit in a controversy. No truth is without some mixture of error, and no error so false but that it possesses no element of truth. If a man is in too big of a hurry to give up an error, he is liable to give up some truth with it. And in accepting the arguments of the other man, he is sure to get some errors with it. Honest argument is merely a process of mutually picking the beams and moots out of each other's eyes so both can see clearly. After I get a hold of the truth, I hate to lose it again, and I like to sift all the truth out before I give up on an error." Unquote. The brothers didn't argue dutifully. They took delight in it. In another letter to Spratt, Wilbur chastised him for being too reasonable. He wrote, quote, "I see you are back to your old trick of giving up before you are half beaten in an argument. I felt pretty certain of my own ground, but was anticipating the pleasure of a good scrap before the matter was settled," unquote. Charles Taylor, the Wright Cycle Company's only employee and chief mechanic, described the air in the room above him where the brothers worked as, quote, "frightened with argument," unquote. He recalled, quote, "The boys were working out a lot of theory in those days, and occasionally they would get into terrific arguments. They'd shout at each other something terrible. I don't think they really got mad, but they sure got awfully hot," unquote. How did they get hot without getting mad? Yvonne Wright Miller, a niece of the brothers, identified one crucial ingredient when she noted that the brothers were adamant at arguing and listening. The tougher they fought, the more intently they listened to each other. Another ingredient was trust, the deep trust that came from their affection for one another and their relentless focus on the same goal. The night after the brothers argued about how to fix the well digging problem, Orville did not sleep. Not because he had argued with his brother, but because his mind was racing through the possibilities generated by their argument. He reviewed Wilbur's points, then synthesized them with his own. At the breakfast table, he presented the solution, an adjustable rudder. Following a few further suggestions from Wilbur, the brothers made their first fully controllable glider. Now they could move on to a whole new series of arguments. As you can see from the story about the Wright brothers, they not only grew up learning how to argue with each other, but used their arguments to inspire new creativity and ideas on the projects they worked on together. Even if it looked tense to other people, the Wright brothers emphasized how their arguments inspired each other. To inspire people in conflicts, a key thing that needs to happen is allow constructive criticisms in disagreements. Let's talk more about this. In Cambridge in 1951, Francis Crick and James Watson were working on a joint mission to discover the structure of DNA. They knew time was short. A second pair of eminent scientists was working on the same problem in London. Watson had just attended a conference at which one of their rivals, Maurice Wilkins, presented the first clear images of DNA. Wilkins was at King's College, the other main center of DNA research in Britain after Cambridge. In the X-ray lab there, he met a young researcher called Rosalind Franklin. On their first meeting, he managed to annoy Franklin by assuming she was one of his assistants rather than a researcher in her own right. She had already made the crucial discovery that there are two forms of DNA. From then on, though, a formidable team, Wilkins and Franklin maintained polite but distant relations. In 1953, Crick and Watson jointly published their Nobel Prize-winning paper proposing a double helix structure of DNA, a discovery now regarded as one of the greatest of the 20th century. Crick said, quote, "We had evolved unstated but fruitful methods of collaboration, something quite missing in the London group. If either of us suggested a new idea, the other, while taking it seriously, would attempt to demolish it in a candid but non-hostile manner. This turned out to be quite crucial," unquote. At work, there is often a tendency to deny the role that conflict plays in creative thinking. Hence the much repeated mantra that in a brainstorm, there are no bad ideas. Berkeley psychologist Charlene Nemeth, one of the authors of the Devil's Advocate studies, wanted to see if it was true that barring criticism made groups more creative. She organized 91 five-person groups in America and France and asked them to come up with ideas to solve a local traffic congestion problem. Some groups were instructed to brainstorm in the conventional manner without criticizing each other's contributions. Others were told to engage in debate and criticism. Nemeth found that the debaters generated more ideas than the brainstormers. One reason for this, she speculates, is that instituting a norm of open criticism may actually lower people's anxiety about being judged. When criticism is framed as a way for the group to reach better answers, people take it less personally. The sentiment of no bad ideas is well-intentioned. If people feel nervous about their ideas being judged or challenged, it is undoubtedly true that they will be less likely to speak up, leaving the conversation less fertile than it should be. But Nemeth's research suggests that the best way to address this problem is not to try and abolish disagreement, it is to get people feeling more confident about it. And the only way to do that is for the organization's leaders to model and encourage a culture in which it is okay to be wrong. It is okay to show vulnerability, and everyone recognizes that open disagreement is a source of creative thinking. We need to hear the bad ideas to get to the good ones. Another thing we need to do to have inspiration from conflicts is to have mutual trust and a shared goal in disagreements. We are only willing to expand our perspectives and new arguments when we trust each other to help us learn new information, and we have a shared goal of having us succeed together. To be clear, the trust does not have to be too deep. Healthy disagreement does not require so much intimacy with another person. In its minimal form, it means quote, I trust that you are interested in something more from this conversation than winning or getting your way, unquote. The shared goal could be as shallow as a mutual desire to get through a brief interaction on social media, having learned something from each other. But the stronger the trust and the more important the goal is to the participants, the more energetic and edifying the disagreement can be. In short, stronger relationships make for higher quality disagreements. There's no guaranteed route to a good disagreement because no one person has that in their power. But for most of us, most of the time can do something to make it go better. Remember, this is not about winning arguments, but instead about you learning new insights and ideas, as well as unlocking your creativity. In conclusion, conflict inspires us by fueling growth within ourselves. The Wright brothers didn't succeed because they avoided disagreements. They succeeded because they leaned into it, challenged each other's ideas, listened just as fiercely as they argued, and stayed united by trust and a shared goal. Their clashes didn't tear them apart. They sharpened their thinking and led to breakthroughs that changed the world in aviation. The same pattern shows up in everyday life. Constructive criticism helps us refine our ideas, where open disagreement pushes us to see blind spots we could not have noticed alone. When people feel safe enough to be authentic and freely express any idea they have, conversations become more honest, more creative, and more productive. The key is remembering what disagreement is for. It is not about proving someone else wrong or winning. It is about learning, improving, and building something better together. That only happens when we assume good intentions, listen carefully, and focus on the shared goal rather than our egos. So, the next time you find yourself in a disagreement, try to see it as an opportunity to grow, think differently, and create something new. This is how we use conflict to inspire us instead of dividing us. In the next video, we will proceed into talking about the rules of productive disagreement to have better disagreement anywhere you are at, starting with establishing a connection in a conversation. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the change maker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.